Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman. We have Brett Barley with us. Hello, Brett.
What's up, y'all?
And we are here with Season 2 of Under the Glass. We completed Season 1 last year. It's a production that we here at Real have collabed with Surfline to produce. And we're excited to bring you Season 2, 9 episodes, 1 episode releasing every week. And we're starting out with episode number 1, which is the Channel Islands 2.0 Pro versus the Channel Islands CI Pro. Let's get into it. Brett, let's first talk about 2.0 Pro versus CI Pro. And when you look at like normally in the surf industry, you got like a board model, it's out for a year, it's out for a couple years, then everybody expects a replacement. And then so the brand will then like replace it with a new model. And looking at the 2.0 Pro, I think that's like what a lot of people thought initially, like, okay, 2.0 Pro, that's replacing the CI Pro. But in speaking with the guys at CI and like talking about the boards, they look at it more as a quiver, like based on the differences in the board. Like you want to dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, so for me, I started out, the first Channel Islands I got was the CI Pro, and full high performance, proper steep, powerful waves. And then hopping onto the 2.0 Pro, a little bit less rocker, goes way better in a little bit softer waves. Okay. So this I could feel a threshold of when it was like shoulder high and starting to be not so steep, it started to struggle a little bit. And this thing goes really well down in the like waist stomach high range and up. So this fills the void just as a step down from this. They're both these are both 510s, exact same dimensions, exact same volume. But this operates and rides a lot better in softer waves or slightly less powerful waves than this does.
So talking about the Pro, which was the first board to come out, the unique thing about this board is putting more rocker back into the board and putting continuous rocker into the board. A lot of the brands were going flatter or flatter entry, and everything was going flatter, flatter, flatter. And these guys went the whole opposite direction by going with more rocker in the board and also continuous rocker. Not necessarily for bigger waves, but like curvier, punchy.
Yeah, more just proper high performance waves. So when you have a flatter board, it goes really fast, but you're gonna slide out when you start doing carves and turns and steeper sections. That extra rocker helps off the bottom, off the top, and on the rail in those deep, steep sections with more speed. And so that's why I've been loving the CI Pro, but really stoked on the 2.0 Pro to fill that void where this starts bogging.
So going back to that concept of these boards being like a good pair and a quiver, or at least like their initial concept of that being the case, is that the boards, like you mentioned, they have the same dimensions, they have the same foil like throughout the board, the same volumes like per dimensions. Like basically the only thing that's differing is the rocker. Like
so when I ordered this one, I was expecting it to be, it's like typically for me, if I have, my 510 step up, or not step up boards, but kind of like high performance boards, like the waves are pumping, whether it's 4 to 5 foot or 6 to 8 foot, something that's going to allow me to do big carves, lay it on rail, surf in the pocket, and not skip out. I would go 510 with similar dimensions to this. And so when I was thinking 2.0 Pro, I was thinking like, I would probably step down to like a 5.9, go a little wider to fill that void. Like when I start stepping down into like softer waves, I like to go a little bit wider. These boards are exactly the same, and it still gives me that feel and drive that I need in softer waves. Yeah, I would say they're like perfect complements to each other. Depending on what you roll up to and how steep and good it is, or how soft and playful it is, you can hop from one to the other.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I noticed, like looking at shortboard quivers, there seems to be like a lot of density in the quiver in a short amount of size ranges.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense literally to have 2 510s and just have different rockers in them, rather than going like, you're gonna feel a much bigger difference like if you were to start sizing like this board up.
Yeah.
Like even like a 6.0, you'd be like, no, I don't ride a 6.0.
Right. Or even like I was saying, when I would step down to my 5.9s, they were a little bit wider, then all of a sudden you get those kind of steeper sets that come in, or bigger waves that come in, or whatever, and I would slide out. And so I would say that both these boards have like a high range of waves that they work in. They're very forgiving with the way the rails are, a little bit boxier rails than a lot of boards that I ride. But what I found with that was that they were more forgiving. When you start getting that knifed out rail, if you're not doing it right, you're going to know you're not doing it right.
Right.
And so, they're just kind of like perfect complements to the range of waves.
Let's dig in specifically, since that's the newer of the two boards, let's dig into the 2-Point Pro and talk a little bit about the shape and like kind of performance and like kind of wave range. So again, like with these two boards being a pair, what range of surf like does this board start working? Like where you like it's like your go-to like in small waves. Like what's the smallest that you've ridden this board and liked it?
I personally haven't ridden it much smaller than like stomach high. Okay. I mostly like if I'm rolling up and it's in the like stomach to chest high range, then I decide that I could ride this. Sometimes in that same range I would ride like the 2 Happy, but for me the 2 Happy's got it's more beefy. It's a little more floaty. It's for softer surf. So as long as there's a little bit of curl and punch to it, then this is my go-to, where it performs better. It performs like the CI Pro, but it operates a lot better in those smaller conditions. Whereas that, you need the punch, you need the speed, right. You need a little bit more power.
Can you expand on the operates better? Like in the softer conditions, like what is it that you're looking for that this board's not giving you?
Yeah, so I'm very focused on high performance surfing. I like to do airs, turns, blowtails, carves, like just basically be able to like stand up and do whatever I want on the wave. And so a lot of times, if you have a wider board, you're a little bit limited to how, vertical you can go or whatever. And with the CI Pro being as rockered out as it is, then when the waves get a little softer, you're limited to like how well you can draw out your turns, because that extra rocker requires more like curve to the wave and more speed. You'll end up bogging more. So with the less rocker with this one, you can carry it through, finish and wrap your turns around, and just it gives you like good float and drive through like small soft sections, but still the high performance of like the CI Pro.
Okay, and then what about on the upper end? Like kind of where do you see like the size of the wave, and then I would also say the power of the wave, like being too much for this board?
Yeah, I honestly haven't necessarily found it. I haven't tried it because I have the option of both.
Yeah.
When it hits that realm, I would say once it hits head high and is like fully bowly and punchy, then I'm on the CI Pro.
Okay.
Because at that size and range, and if it's steep, then I want something that I know when I get that one section, I'm going to be able to drive through it. I don't want to be skipping out. And so I get pretty, I can kind of pigeonhole boards into like certain conditions.
Right.
So for me, this I really like in the stomach to head high range.
Okay.
And then the CI Pro I like in the like chest to shoulder to overhead range. And I don't really like delve into trying each of them
like trying to max
outside.
It out.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'm not trying to max it out. It works so well in that. I have caught, like head high overhead waves on this, and it felt so good. And I didn't even necessarily notice it skipping a beat, but I do notice the extra rocker in that when you get into the overhead range helps. So. And
let's talk a little. I mean, I think it's for most people, they're going to understand the difference between like the height of the wave and then also and the punch of the wave. But I think there's a lot of people that might not.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially like here, it's always punchy. Like we have the angriest 1-foot wave ever.
Well, yeah, that's why none of us learned how to do the proper cutback.
And the but like in California where a lot of the waves are a little bit softer.
Yeah.
There's just different like thicknesses, right, to the wave, and also different curves. And so you're finding this like to work better in like flatter face surf.
Yeah, flatter face. That is a good way to point it. Like a lot of times when I think of waves and quality and speed and power and all that, it's in reference to home, which is punchy, short, shore breaky beach breaks. And so, typically just as a roundabout, whether it was points or whatever, wherever you're from, I would go for the CI2 or the 2-Point Pro when it's like a little softer. You don't have that fully bowled out section, regardless of size. And then I go with the CI Pro when it's just more powerful and steeper.
Okay.
Again, regardless of size, because I have ridden that when it was only like stomach to chest high, and it went well. It actually went really good surfing some shore break waves one day, but it's like barreling. There's a lot of curve there, and you can surf with more rocker. It's one of the things that growing up here I learned talking with shapers over the years and like kind of breaking down like the boards I grew up riding from my teens into my 20s and like transitioning into what I ride now. And a lot of that was based around like I was able to ride kind of narrower, more rockered out boards than like pretty much everyone else my size because of the waves I was surfing all the time. So it is relative. It's not necessarily so much the size as it is the shape.
Okay. Let's talk about like accessibility on this board, like who could ride it, you know, if they're stepping up to it versus like the top end of it, you know, as far as like, you know, advanced or pro level.
Yeah.
Let's first talk about accessibility. Like who, you know, like as far as who could ride that? Like, is it a hard board to ride?
No,
like,
I think
like very like kind of you got to be on your game.
Like I was saying earlier, it's very forgiving.
Okay.
You know, whether you miss time a section or pumping or whatever. I wouldn't say that there's like a limit as to who could ride it.
Yep.
You know, it's pretty much a good all-around shortboard.
Okay.
Good as far as like I could do whatever I want on a wave, but also someone that is still just like stepping into the shortboard realm would be able to hop on it and not feel like, you know, Bambi and trying to figure it out.
Okay. So that's a big range. I mean,
I think so. At least, you know, in my opinion, based off what I've felt riding this, it's not so knifed out that like you got to be on your game. And it just works as a good all-around shortboard.
And what about
like I'm finding myself grabbing this more than the CI Pro.
Okay.
Because that's more of a specific type of board.
Okay. And what about the last thing we want to touch on is just generating speed. Like, did you find like a difference between the two boards, like when you have to generate speed?
Well, so that's where I noticed on the CI Pro, like if you have to generate speed with that extra rocker, it can struggle a little bit.
Okay.
And that's why you want to have that in the waves that you're surfing already.
Okay.
Whereas this definitely is better at generating speed, especially in smaller surf. That's just what you're going to get out of a little bit flatter board.
So if someone's like on the fence, like between the two, and they're not really sure if their waves are soft or punchy, or maybe they're like right in the middle, but they're always finding themselves like having to generate speed, like maybe gravitate more towards the 2-point Pro.
I would say if you have to think about it enough, go 2-point Pro.
Okay.
100%. Because I haven't had a time where I hopped on this and felt like I was struggling.
Yep.
Whereas I have had a time where I hopped on the CI Pro and the conditions weren't just right, and then I was kind of struggling.
Okay.
And so I would say this fits a wider realm of waves than the CI Pro.
Awesome. Okay, so you're showing up at the beach and you do your scouts over the dune. And
for the 10th time.
And Jeffrey's pairing clips to all this. He's like, you're going over the dune, you're going over the dune, you're going over the dune, and then you find the spot, and it's way too much for this, right?
Yeah.
So you're pulling out the Pro. Let's dig into the Pro.
So the Pro
and where this fits in your quiver.
This just feels good to pick up right now. I haven't ridden in a while. As you can tell, you can see the difference in the wax. It's wintertime right now. I haven't been riding this the last couple weeks. And I have been riding this.
Yeah. But this one made it through glorious September, though.
Oh my gosh, this was actually my go-to board for a lot of September. It was between this and one other one, but I hadn't ridden a board with this much rocker in a long time, maybe ever actually, in relation to like the quivers I used to have. And so it took me a little bit. The one thing I did notice was I needed to use a little bit more raked out fins. As you see in this one, I have the John Johns from Futures. And that's what I had in this to start with, but I was struggling a little bit. And so I happen to have some Pizels in this. That's been kind of my go-to lately. The AM1s or the AM2s would serve the same purpose. I just didn't have a pair of them. And it's kind of what I'm like very nitpicky. I'm one of those guys where it's like, oh, like that felt good. So I'm just going to keep riding that. And I don't experiment too much, but I would say that with the CI Pro, you do want a little bit more raked out fin to grip the wave better. But this board for airs and for turns, it was super, super responsive in like a steep face, just off the bottom, off the top. I felt like this fall, I kind of had like a little like aha moment as far as like that more vertical surfing. I get like very down the line focused at air sections or like pumping real hard and doing a big turn, especially in steep waves. Like I said, our waves here are just like dumpy by the beach, shore break waves. And so top to bottom surfing is a little bit harder, or I've always found it a little bit harder.
Right.
And now I'm realizing maybe I just need more rocker. And so like having a board like this kind of changed the way I was approaching waves and made that top to bottom surfing in the pocket of a steep wave way more approachable. I felt like there were so many times I was coming up off the top thinking like, oh, I'm going to fall or I'm going to bog or whatever, and the thing would just glide right through it and I would be able to connect. I would say for me, this is my favorite over the 2-point Pro.
Okay.
But again, like I was saying, I'm riding the 2-point Pro more because of the range of waves it works in.
Right.
But that's kind of what's great though, is like you said, they complement each other. It's not that one replaces the other one. They're both good in different conditions.
Let's talk about something that'll be overlooked, I think, in this whole like talk is the fact that they're the same size. right? So they're the same length
Yeah.
and dimensions and volume, right? And foil, it's just the rocker. Like, to a surfer at your level, like, how does that help you, like, transition back and forth between the two?
I mean, I think it's great because, like I said before, when I was kind of jumping up and down in sizes for or widths or whatever for different types of waves, you know, there still is a little bit of that adjustment, or you end up getting that one wave in the session that is either softer or steeper than the rest, and so then your board isn't as dialed for that wave. And for me, it's like that one wave might be really important. And I don't want to blow it. And so I feel like this board has kind of, like I said, it's a little more forgiving. So when that one outlier of a wave comes in, it still gets the job done.
Okay. And what about, you hear shapers talking about, like, more rocker fits into curvier waves and less rocker fits into flatter waves. Like, how does that translate into, like, your underfoot feel? Like, when you
Underfoot feel.
Yeah, like what you're feeling in the board, or in your surfing. You know, like, when you have a board that has more rocker and you're riding it in bowlier waves, like, what does it allow you to do that a flatter board doesn't?
This is Tripp trying to dumb down how surfboards work with me, because I don't know how they work. And so that's a good way to put it. So when I think back to, like, sessions I've had on both boards, I would say when you get that steeper wave, that hollower, like, faster, you know, waves drawing a lot of water off, so the water's, like, you know, real packed, and your rail's not going to dig in as well on something that's flatter. And so it might take more pressure, take more leaning, take more push to drive and make the board do what you want to do, or at least attempt. Whereas the extra rocker helps you kind of glide through that. It does it with a little more ease in those situations. That's now that I'm running it through my head, that's how I would think of it.
Okay, good. No, it's a good. Thanks for sharing. That's a good description of it. You know, because you hear the shapers say that all the time, or at least, you know, when you do catch one saying, like, oh, that totally makes sense. But then hearing it from the surfer side.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this being, like, the most rockered out shortboard I've ridden in a long time, that was, like, the one thing that I noticed the most, was that spots where I would normally, like I said, the top to bottom surfing in a steep wave, or just kind of the looseness that I had off the lip of a steep section, places before where I would skip out or have to kind of baby it a little more. This was just allowing me to, like, ride and go where I wanted.
Okay, let's talk about wave range. Like, where did you kind of find this board to start working? Like, where you liked it?
Yeah.
And then, like, kind of what's the, you know, kind of gnarliest stuff you put it in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I put it in anything more than, like, maybe a foot or two overhead. I found that once I hit that chest high level, that's where it started getting, like, if the waves were good and steep enough, then it was still okay, or still go decent. But I'm talking, like, you know, again, a shore break wave, something that's, like, really bowly.
Yep.
So for me, it was the best if it was, like, solid chest to shoulder with, like, head high sets.
Yep.
And again, good form, up to, like, a foot or two overhead.
Okay.
And that's just at this size in the 510. I could easily see, and I would be very curious to get it, you know, with a round tail, like, another 2 inches longer to be able to ride it, and, you know, a couple feet overhead.
Right.
As a shortboard for doing big turns and stuff on like a playful bigger wave.
Yep.
So, but yeah, for me, that, you know, 510, my go-to shortboard, you know, 4 to 5 foot with, like, 7 to 8 foot sets. Faces. We're on the East Coast.
We covered accessibility with the 2-point Pro. Let's talk about it with the Pro. Like, what surfer could you see adding this board to their career? Let's say they have, like, a daily driver shortboard from CI or from Lost or from someone else, and they're thinking about adding this in. Like, where should their ability, like, if they're riding another shortboard, are they there where they could ride the CI Pro?
Yes. If you are already, like, super comfortable on any type of shortboard,
right,
then yes, stepping up to this for high performance surfing and trying to push yourself a little more is totally fine. I would say that it does take a skilled surfer, because having that extra rocker is going to kind of make you aware of your weaknesses as far as, like, where you're mistiming things. If it's not, like, a proper wave. Right. So, like, for me, I know, like, oh, I stand up on this wave, it's not quite as steep and powerful as other ones, and so I got to kind of baby this and baby that. And if you just keep trying to surf it like just a regular shortboard, you're going to dig a little bit. I would say that it is for, like, at least an advanced surfer. I wouldn't say that if you're learning to surf, this would be, you're learning to get on a shortboard, this would be where you start it all. So
Yeah, you'd be more 2-point pro.
Yeah.
At that point. Okay, excellent.
Now that I'm like trying to think, like if I had to pick one, I wouldn't really like pick one.
Okay.
I guess is the best way to,
That's
to put it.
Straight feedback.
I mean, I guess
after a lot of time on them.
if I had to pick one, okay, if I had, say like, I owned both of them and you were taking one away.
Maybe
I would
do the Desert Island.
Yeah. Desert Island. You only get one
have
choice. Then I would go 2-point pro, just because of the the range that it fits in.
But if you had two,
then I would go both.
all right, that's awesome. Excellent. Well, Brett, thank you so much.
Saying that, I'm gonna head out before he takes any of these.
Thank you. So we're not allowed to take those back.
No.
Thanks for joining us, Brett.
I also did, just as a side note, I did the best air I've done in like maybe a couple years on this board this fall.
And that's the Pro.
On the CI Pro, yes.
On the CI Pro.
Yes. It was pretty nice upside down air verse.
Nice.
Felt really good to stomp one that high. It had been a while, so that was kind of my highlight of the fall.
Well, as you're watching that clip right now in slow motion, we want to thank everyone for joining us. Season 2, Under the Glass, presented by Reel and Surfline. We've got 8 more episodes dropping every week. We've got some great boards to cover, and also, like last year, we're going to have a season finale, season ender called Lessons Learned. We're going to cover everything that we learned through this past year.
Everything that Tripp's teaching me about surfing. and surfboards.
And also that Brett's teaching me about selling surfboards.
Rocker, concave, fins.
If anybody out there has any questions about the Channel Islands 2-point pro or the Channel Islands CI Pro, or would like to order one, either stock or custom order, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for tuning in.
And right now, before you go, just know that Jeffrey walked into the shot.
Brett's doing a, what do they call it in the play? In the play, like an encore. He's going to do an encore.
The encore is, both of these boards are straight off the rack stock dims. Neither one of these was made custom. So I did not change the dimensions to what my liking. These are just, if you order a 510, that's what these are. So, yeah.
Stock board, stock dims,
stock board
glass.
goes good. Stock everything. Stock your quiver.
Get stocked.